I'm Kiera Morgan. Thanks for joining me for Coffee with Kiera, sponsored by The Human Being in Lincoln City and in Newport. And I am very happy to be with my friend Kaety Jacobson, County Commissioner today. It's been a while since we talked. How are you doing?
It's been a while. I think we sat in my office without masks and had coffee the last time we did this. So that's an indication of how long it's been.
It
a while.
Is.
Yeah.
So, Kaety, let's talk a little bit about how things are going for Lincoln County. We are still working with the pandemic going on, but are things starting to get better?
I mean, as far as COVID cases, we're starting to, come down from where we were with the Delta variant, certainly, but COVID is not going away. It's just one of these things that we're going to, it's going to require ongoing management, but there is, some hope on the horizon. We have a really high vaccination rate in Lincoln County, so that's awesome. It also looks like at the end of next week that FDA will be voting on potentially moving children's vaccines from ages 5 to 11 forward in the process, and then it would go to the CDC. So we're looking at, sometime in November that kids may be eligible for vaccines. So, that's something that's positive as well. So we're certainly in a better place now than we were, this time last year when we really hadn't started, vaccinations yet.
And the county is still offering vaccination clinics and information for folks and resources, right?
Yeah, so we have our call center back up and running for COVID. We still have vaccine and testing, those kinds of things. There isn't the amount of people getting vaccinated every week like there was in the beginning when it was first available. So now it's kind of take the vaccine to you. So we have mobile clinics that are throughout the community in any week. So they're not necessarily in the same spot every single week, but there also is opportunities to get vaccinated now if you have a primary care provider through pharmacies, which are super easy. But then we also have these mobile clinics that will go out into areas that are more remote, like up in Otis or up in Tidewater, or events that are happening in the community or something like that, so that it, helps people that might have a barrier to get to a vaccine, that one will come to them.
And then how are things looking for North County in recovery from the fires from last year?
Yeah, so fire recovery is one of the main things on my workload. At this point, it was just one of those things that there was no necessarily decision that Katy was taking that on. I just kind of grabbed it and called it my own. But so that's where I spend a significant amount of my time, is working on fire recovery. A lot of exciting stuff happening up there. We have Lincoln County Housing Authority receiving credits from the Oregon Community Housing Agency this actually last week, and they're actually putting out a request for proposals this week to build a 40-unit complex in North Lincoln County for fire survivors on fixed incomes that are still living in hotels and are not able to get back home. A lot of them being renters and that sort of thing. So that's exciting that we're going to have a permanent solution for many of these people. Not all, but many. We're still working on plans for the rest. We are working on a request for technical assistance to FEMA. So technical assistance for things we need to move us forward in the recovery process, where we just don't have that expertise, kind of in-house. So I've been working on that proposal this week with many community partners, and are hoping to get that out the door. Well, I have to get it out the door by next week, because that's the deadline. So yeah, so there's a lot of things happening, and I think it's important for the rest of the community that maybe doesn't live in Otis or doesn't go through there on a regular basis to recognize that this is not over. I said this to somebody that I was working on this, that resides in the South County, and they kind of said, well, why are you working on that? That was a year ago. I mean, we still have over 100 people in hotels, people living in travel trailers, we still have a lot
Yeah,
of
it's
people.
not an overnight fix.
It's not an overnight fix. And a lot of people were uninsured or underinsured. And so getting homes rebuilt is challenging. There's also a lot of people that were renters, and those rental houses that burned, maybe that property was sold and it's not going to be an option again for them. So it is not done. And I think it's important for the rest of the community in Lincoln County that maybe wasn't directly impacted or isn't directly involved in recovery to realize that, recovery is a marathon. It's not a sprint, and we are still in that marathon, and those people are still in that marathon too.
So let's talk a little bit about housing.
The Board of Commissioners who have control over the vacation rentals in the unincorporated parts of the county, not inside cities, but the unincorporated parts. We have been working on a process for several years and are finally kind of coming to the end of that process. And those rules are not formalized yet, but we are in the middle of doing code changes. We have had what was initially a limited or a short-term moratorium on new licenses that went into effect a year ago, and then COVID, and then wildfires. And so it was longer than we anticipated because we were hoping to have these rules in place a long time ago. Anyways, so we've had a rule on new licenses in place for quite a while now. That rule would be changing into a more permanent rule, and one based on kind of an area or areas, I should say, as well as changing our code to reduce occupancy limits and reducing occupancy in a way that would be easier for law enforcement to enforce, as well as becoming more stringent on inspection requirements for short-term rentals, because a lot of them in the unincorporated parts are on septic systems, unlike rentals that are inside the city that are on city sewer and water services.
And let's talk a little bit about the economy in Lincoln County. There's a lot of help wanted. I think things are kind of starting to get a little bit better as things are slowing down as we hit our winter season. But a lot of what we're hearing is that it's because of lack of housing throughout Lincoln County, and also a lack of available childcare for people to be able to get back to work. Is that something that the county is currently working on?
Well, I think for one, issues like that, housing and childcare, and I absolutely agree with you that those are barriers to employment in Lincoln County. Those are not the only barriers to employment. I mean, we're experiencing shortages across the entire nation right now in labor. So it's not just us, but I think the two issues you identified are certainly the two biggest issues we have here. So these are issues that I really think are community responsibility. It's not just the county's responsibility to do this. It's kind of everybody, and it's going to require everybody to solve some of this stuff. And so, I know that I think it was yesterday evening or the evening before, Oregon Coast Community College hosted a meeting for people interested in becoming childcare providers. Thank you, Community College, for doing that. That is not something I believe they have done before. I think they had a very good turnout on that. And granted, that's just the initial meeting. People have to go through certification, et cetera, et cetera. I also believe there was some policy issues that were identified in that meeting. I guess there had been some policy changes around fire suppression, and new providers have to have a full fire suppression process rather than alternatives, which in-home providers can have alternatives. Like I'm in my home right now and I have smoke detectors that you can see right there and stuff like that. And that would not pass if I wanted to become an in-home provider. So I think there
seems to be a big disconnect that I've found over the years, is that the state requirements are almost unrealistic.
Yeah.
Home providers, and therefore creating this shortage of childcare for families.
Yes, absolutely. And I think in our community, most of our childcare is in home, especially for the under preschool age. I should say that for under preschool age, most of it is in home providers. It's a huge part of how we scrap together what little childcare we have here. So I know that issue was kind of uncovered and really talked about at that meeting at OCCC. I was not there, but got an email from them. And I think they are putting a policy team kind of together to try to tackle that with the state and find either a workaround or change the law. I mean, sometimes that is, we of course want kids to be safe, but most homes do not have a fire suppression system like you would have,
Right.
in a school or something. It's just a little bit unrealistic to have that, smoke detectors, fire extinguishers, an exit plan, all of that
Right.
stuff.
Absolutely.
Completely normal to have in a home. So I think that these are things that we need, like I said, our community partners to work on with us. And we were thankful for the community college and others, to kind of start taking that on. Housing wise, I mentioned that we do have a housing project with our disaster credits that Housing Authority will be working on. There also was some money given out of the Christmas tree bill for another housing project in Lincoln County. And today at the Board of Commissioners meeting, I talked about one of the things that we're going to ask for in the technical assistance grants that I'm working on to go out the door next week is technical assistance around housing. And I wanted it all, but I have to really focus my request. I was told on my initial feedback or initial draft to FEMA that it can't be, we want you to do everything. It's got to be a very specific request. And so we have narrowed down that request for asking for a housing developer that has some specialty in mobile home parks or tiny home villages. That's something we get asked about a lot. A lot of people want to develop those. And our request is to have a specialist come in, do some assessment of property in the whole county, looking at where would be the easiest places to develop those things. How would you get funding for that? How would you get in if it's in the unincorporated parts? How would you deal with septic systems and sewer and that kind of stuff? And then additionally, how would that operate? Is that ran by a nonprofit? Is that like a co-op where we all buy in? What would be kind of the management structure of a project like that? And like I said, how would you actually fund it? And hopefully, if we get that technical assistance for 18 months, we would be able to actually have them do a site development plan for at least one project if we were able to identify the resources to have it built out and identify that management system. The county has also decided by the end of this calendar year to put out an RFP for hiring a housing development specialist to work directly with the county on housing in general and start going after trying to put some housing development deals together or trying to work on how we create more housing out of the inventory we have. There's a concept around middle housing, which is kind of using land use in a different way. So anyways, there is some definite things we are doing at the county to try to help with housing.
Wonderful. Thank you, Katy. Is there anything else that you'd like to add as we're wrapping up?
I think we covered all the big things. I guess the last thing I'll say is we are moving forward on the animal shelter. So animal shelter project is very exciting, and we are working with a firm right now to come up with the design of that building. And so that's just a really exciting thing that we're working on right now.
Well, we look forward to following the progress of that and all the other wonderful things. You are appreciated beyond words for everything that you take on and tackle and do. And thank you so much for joining me today on Coffee with Kiera. Again, sponsored by Human Being, Newport at 6th Street and Highway 101, and in Lincoln City at the north end of the highway on the west side near TLC Credit Union. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.
For Oregon Coast Breaking News, I'm Kiera Morgan.